Item 9A, receive report regarding citywide intersection safety study.
Jimmy.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. The item in front of you tonight has been an interest of the City Council to improve vehicle traffic and pedestrian safety at intersections throughout the city. Last year, City Council requested staff to conduct a citywide analysis to determine whether there will be any potential site distance issues at intersections within the city. The City Council then approved a contract with TJCAM Transportation Consultants to perform the evaluation. The scope of work was to perform an initial evaluation of 20 intersections in the city to determine whether there is sufficient intersection site distance and provide recommended measures to improve the safety. The goal was for staff to use the results from the study as a template for possible development of policies that could guide future intersection evaluations to be conducted by staff in-house. The study has been completed, and we're here tonight to provide an overview of TJCAM's analysis and recommended improvements.
Intersection sight distance is defined as a distance at which a motorist can see potentially conflicting vehicles at an intersection. Intersection sight distance should be of sufficient length to allow motorists to anticipate and avoid potential collisions and should be kept free of obstructions such as parked vehicles, hedges, utility poles, and buildings. Insufficient sight distance can lead to an increase in the number of collisions as motorists may be unable to see and react to approaching vehicles. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the study now. TJCAM started their process by researching collision records in the Transportation Injury Mapping System, known as TIMS, which is a collision records database maintained by the State Transportation Research and Education Center at UC Berkeley. TIMS draws its data from the statewide integrated traffic record system, also known as SWITRS, which is a collision report database maintained by the state of California. TIMS geocodes the collision data, which greatly increases the ease and accuracy with which engineers can perform analysis with the data. TJCAM reviewed the collision records for the 5-year period from 2010 through 2014. That time period was selected because the data in the TIMS system for more recent years is still in a provisional state. Intersections that are not under the city's jurisdiction were excluded from consideration. Examples of these would be all the intersections along El Camino Real, which are owned by the state of California. TJCAM was able to zero in on 67 intersections in San Bruno where at least one collision had been reported during the 5-year period. TJCAM then ranked the 67 intersections based on a number of criteria, including the number of collisions that were reported at the intersection, the type of collisions that occurred, the severity of the collisions, and whether the collision involved a pedestrian or cyclist. The ranking system also assigned higher scores if the location is in a residential area, near a school, or near a senior center. The top 10 intersections by score were selected for further analysis. However, the scoring system favors major roads with higher traffic volumes, and staff also wanted to include local street intersections in the study. Therefore, for the second 10 locations, TJCAM and staff gave preference to intersections of 2 local streets that do not have always stop or traffic signal control. The intersections of Walnut Avenue with 2nd Avenue and San Anselmo Avenue with Santa Lucia Avenue were also selected because TJCAM and staff identified them as having characteristics that would fit into the intent of the study. TJCAM then conducted field visits and detailed analysis of the 20 selected intersections. As part of their evaluations for the 20 intersections, TJCAM considered many different factors, including, but not limited to, roadway classifications, speed limits, the type of control, meaning whether it's got stop signs, yield signs, or traffic signals, intersection geometry, and collision history. Intersection sight distance was also evaluated at every location. Based on the evaluations, TJCAM recommended a number of different types of improvements at the various locations. At 11 of the intersections, TJCAM determined there was insufficient sight distance. The recommended treatment for insufficient sight distance is primarily to remove obstructions, including on-street parking, to improve the sight distance. So this is a figure that originated in the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials policy on geometric design of highways and streets. It shows what is known as a departure site triangle. Departure site distance is used when one of the two intersecting streets is controlled by a stop sign. In the figure, the street that is running up and down the slide is the minor street, and it's controlled by stop signs at the intersection, and the major street runs left and right on the slide. It is uncontrolled. In this situation, the site distance must be such that a driver entering the intersection from the minor street can complete their maneuver without causing a conflict with a vehicle approaching on the major street. An example of what this means is a driver making a left turn from the minor street must be able to complete their turn and accelerate up to the speed limit without causing a driver approaching on the minor street to even have to slow down. For a typical intersection of two local streets with 25-mile-per-hour speed limits, this means the driver on the minor street must be able to see an approaching vehicle at a distance of 240 feet away to the left and 280 feet away to the right. And those distances are labeled on the slide in red near the top of the slide. Next slide. So other common recommendations included adding or enhancing warning signs. Examples of some of the types of warning signs being recommended are on the top left of the slide. Adding centerline striping approaching intersections. This can improve safety at the intersections. It may also require removing parking. An example of this is shown on the upper right. There's a before and after. That before is what a lot of our intersections look like now, and the after is adding the center lines. Adding or upgrading our crosswalks to high visibility crosswalks, and examples of the different types of high visibility crosswalks are on the lower left. In San Bruno, we've commonly been using the continental and ladder style, which are the ones on the far left of those four and the far right of those four. And installing rectangular rapid flashing beacons, also known as RRFBs, at pedestrian crossings. A picture of the warning sign with an RRFB is shown on the bottom right of the slide. This is similar to what is currently on Cherry Avenue near YouTube, and also what was recently installed near Parkside Intermediate School and Portola Elementary School. In addition, some locations were identified as possible candidates for always stops or traffic signals. And finally, TJKM identified some roadway segments that they would believe would benefit from additional study as a whole rather than as individual intersections. And those roadway segments are San Bruno Avenue between San Mateo Avenue and 7th Avenue, San Bruno Avenue between Hensley Avenue and Mills Avenue, Walnut Avenue between San Mateo Avenue and 7th Avenue, and Clark Avenue between Oak Avenue and Elm Avenue. Oh, one more, and San Anselmo Avenue between San Felipe Avenue and Santa Helena Avenue. The Traffic Safety and Parking Committee discussed the results of the study on April 4th, 2018. The staff report was informational, so no action was taken by the TSPC at that time. The purpose of this staff report being brought tonight is also for informational purposes and intended to present an overview of the study to the City Council. No action by City Council is being requested at this time either. Staff will be further reviewing the evaluations and recommendations in the study for each of the intersections and develop plans for improvements. The highest priority intersections will be reviewed first, and the improvement recommendations will be presented to the TSPC and the City Council for further consideration. Funding for the improvements will also be required, which is at this time unknown until we have a chance to figure out exactly what those recommendations will be. And staff will efficiently implement the improvements. However, with the limited resources, staff anticipates the implementation of these projects will occur over the next couple of years. This concludes our presentation, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff at this time? Yes. Marty, please.
Thank you for this. We've been waiting a while. I was hoping that our school locations and the intersections leading to our schools would be somehow involved with being a priority, specifically on Angus East. We have Bel Air School I drive through there, especially this last weekend, and when cars park so close to the curb, you're taking a chance when you can't see if the car is coming, because we're stopped. We went to the baseball field, right, on the weekend at a baseball game, and as we were returning back, you have to just take a chance as you edge out and you edge out and edge out. There's a moment where you're hoping that that car is not coming and it could hit you. So I would like to suggest that some additional, somebody just take a drive down there. I took a video of it one time over on Pine, where you're taking your life into your hands just for that brief second, because that car can be going 25 miles an hour, and because that car is right there, you can't see it. So I suggest that, and with the typical intersections that we have in some of those streets, it seems like they could be implemented rather quickly. I know it's going to lose parking, but I'd rather lose parking than lose somebody's health or life in a collision, you know. So those are my comments of wanting to see something sooner than doing more studies of actually starting putting some paint down. That's what my suggestions are.
Any other questions, comments for staff? No, thank you.
I would just add and maybe ask for the director staff's comments in response to Councilmember Medina's comments. The high priority locations that were studied were selected based on a criteria based on safety given accident history. So we used a thoughtful criteria for selection of the intersections that were studied. Clearly there are other intersections in the city where extreme caution is required. In general terms, the evaluation is really needs to be done on an intersection by intersection basis in order to make sure that we have thoughtful and accurate results. And the improvements will generally be fairly costly to implement, particularly using, depending on the number of intersections and the level of treatment that is required. So we are seeking the City Council's specific concurrence if there is an interest. I believe that the staff outlined our proposed next steps, which at this point does not include studying further intersections until we've addressed these 20. So if the council is seeking specific additional analysis, we would appreciate the council's concurrence and direction regarding that.
Thank you.
I was just going to concur with staff's report in that I concur with the analysis that was done and the criteria in taking intersections with high accidents to be our number one priority. And then we can continue down that road.
Irene?
I echo what Laura just said, and that's why we hired the experts. I appreciate the concern about Angus and Bel Air. I drive down there very often, but I also appreciate the criteria that the consultants had to use. So I think we start with what we've got and keep on moving.
Any comments, Marty?
No, I agree with my colleagues here. It'd be great if we could do all of them, and I know that there probably are a lot more that we'd like to get to. But maybe after we get these done and we can demonstrate some success and seeing the impact, then we can maybe roll it out to some additional ones.
Just want to make one other comment.
Please.
What I'm asking for is some red paint. We need to put some red paint on some of these intersections. We don't need to study it anymore. I totally get it that these were based on accidents. Well, this prevents an accident. It's really easy to go out, put some red paint on some corners just to give people a chance to see around a little bit so that they can feel safely to pass through an intersection. I totally get it. Doing the big improvements are expensive. Putting red paint down isn't. So I just have to say that again, because If anybody in this room, and Irene, you have been through there, just a little bit of red paint so you could get that extra car length so you can see that there's nobody approaching. And that's all I'm asking for, is we're gonna do this, of course, but it's not costly to put down red paint. I don't get it, but you know, it takes 3 people to provide direction, and you only have one that wants red curb.
Through the chair,
Irene?
my hesitancy to say, yes, go ahead and put red paint down is because there are many, many places in San Bruno that we all could drive around and say, well, I want red paint here, and I want red paint here, and I want red paint here for very good reasons. I know I could, so we could go on all day, just as our consultant said, there are many other places that we need to do. So we have to make priorities, and we have to decide, you know, and go from there. It's easy to say, do red paint. I would concur that if we want to have traffic and safety give more input about it, or if they want to, you know, if they have some priorities, or I don't know, Jimmy, have you talked to traffic and safety people to see what if they have more concerns that aren't being addressed, or?
The staff presented the same information to the TSBC committee.
Okay.
And it was more for informational purposes only, just as what we're doing here today. And the thought is for us to bring each individual intersections to them with the recommendations for their considerations in the future.
Okay. I guess the next question is, how soon are you going to be doing that? And then how soon can you implement the recommendations? And does it need to come back to us, or are you just going to go ahead and do it?
The recommendations will be brought to the city council level as well for approval.
Okay. And what's your timeline for that?
We do have all the backlog of other TSBC items, you know, in our, in our work plan, and that's something that we need to figure out and prioritize, and which ones to move forward with. In regards to to paint the red curves, you know, that's something that it is. I do agree that it can be easily done. But the only thing is, you know, that would remove potentially a lot of parking spaces within the neighborhood. And imagine if you paint every single intersection throughout the avenues, and given the figure that you saw earlier regarding the departure sight distance, you know, the length of the red curbs that's needed could potentially be up to 200 feet at the intersection. So that's something that needs to be considered, and that's something that the staff is going to look into as well as part of the recommendations that will be brought to the TSPC committee.
Okay, and 200 feet is roughly 10, is that 10 parking spaces, roughly? Okay, that's like half a block on some of those places. Okay, it gets frustrating, I know. We all think, let's go out and do this, we all know, but the truth of the matter is we don't. And that's why we hire people who do know. So I appreciate your thoughtfulness about this. I ask for the audience's understanding. That's why we have a process. That's why we have traffic and safety people who delve into each one of these very thoroughly. And it works best this way if we do it. If we do it this way. I just have a really quick comment. I was at a conference, and I was talking to a relatively new council person from another city, and she was quite excited about being a council person. And she said, I called Public Works, and I told them to go do something, and they went and did it. She said, that was great. And I said, oh my God. I said, what if all 5 of your council people did that? And she stopped and was just horrified, because of course all 5 of them don't agree about what should be done. So she said, I'm going to stop doing that. So that's just a little something that we have to all keep in mind. Thank you.
Steph, have direction or consensus from council?